It's easier if you just stay home this Christmas, Doug. Less complicated, my son-in-law said, dismissing me like I was a burden. My own daughter just sat there silent. They thought I was just a lonely old man with nowhere else to go. I just smiled and did one thing that changed everything. 3 days later, my photos went viral across Grand Rapids, and my phone exploded with 76 missed calls from my daughter. But I never picked up. They're begging for forgiveness now, but it's too late. Before I tell you how one decision changed my entire life. But first, let me know in the comments where you're watching this from, and stay tuned if you think family should be about respect, not obligation. This Christmas, my son-in-law Derek looked me straight in the eye and said something that would change everything. We're doing Christmas at my parents' place this year, Doug. You will be fine on your own. I sat there in my living room, the same Victorian house where Carol and I had celebrated 42 Christmases together. Half-strung lights lay across the coffee table, and the tree stood bare in the corner, waiting for decorations that suddenly felt pointless. The smell of pine mixed with the lingering scent of the pot roast Rebecca had brought over, though neither of them had touched much of it. Derek shifted in Carol's old armchair, the one with the faded roses that she used to curl up in while reading her mystery novels. His voice carried that casual tone people use when they think they are being practical, not hurtful. My mom has been planning this big family gathering for months. It will be easier for everyone if we just do it there. Rebecca sat on the edge of the sofa, her hands folded in her lap, like she was waiting for a job interview to end badly. She would not meet my eyes. My daughter, the little girl who used to insist on putting the angel on top of our tree every year, could not even look at her father. I nodded slowly the way I had learned to do during 32 years of dealing with difficult customers at the post office. That sounds nice, I said, keeping my voice steady. I hope you all have a wonderful time. Derek seemed relieved, probably expecting an argument that never came. Great. I knew you would understand. He stood up, brushing imaginary crumbs from his khakis. Come on, Becca. We still need to pick up the kids from practice. Rebecca finally looked at me then, and I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt, maybe. Or just the uncomfortable recognition that she was choosing her husband's convenience over her father's feelings. Dad, she started, then stopped. We will call you Christmas morning. After they left the house felt impossibly quiet, I walked through rooms that had once buzzed with holiday preparations, where Carol used to hum Christmas carols while baking her famous sugar cookies. The kitchen counter still held the mixing bowls I had pulled out earlier, thinking Rebecca might want to continue the tradition with her girls. I found myself in my workshop, the converted garage, where I had spent countless hours building toy chests and dollhouses when Rebecca was small. Carol's photograph sat on my workbench, the one from our trip to Mackinac Island the summer before she got sick. She was laughing at something I had said, her silver hair catching the sunlight, her eyes bright with the kind of joy that made everything else fade away. What would you do, sweetheart? I whispered to the photo, running my thumb along the frame's edge, but I already knew what Carol would say. She had never been one to sit quietly when something needed changing. During her 35 years of teaching high school English, she had fought for every student who felt invisible or forgotten. She would tell me to stop waiting for other people to remember I existed. I sat there in the workshop surrounded by half-finished projects and the tools that had shaped a lifetime of creating things with my hands. The fluorescent light hummed overhead, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear the Hendersons next door putting up their outdoor Christmas display. For 8 years since Carol died, I had been the grateful father-in-law, the accommodating grandfather, who fit into whatever plans others made. I had convinced myself that being included was enough, even when that inclusion felt more like an afterthought than an invitation. Maybe it was time I stopped waiting for invitations that would never come. Dawn crept through the workshop windows, casting long shadows across the concrete floor, where sawdust still lingered from last month's birdhouse project. I had been awake since 4:30, nursing the same cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. On the shelf above my workbench, 3 boxes of Christmas stockings sat unopened, the ones Carol and I used to hang by the fireplace for Rebecca and the grandkids. The house felt different in the early morning quiet. No footsteps overhead, no television humming in the background, just the steady tick of the wall clock and the occasional groan of the old furnace kicking on. I stared at the family photograph propped against my tool organizer, the one from Rebecca's college graduation 15 years ago. We all looked so certain and so connected. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Through the workshop's side door, I could see Evelyn Price from next door, bundled in her pink bathrobe and holding a plate covered with aluminum foil. "Morning, Doug," she called through the glass. "Brought you some of those oatmeal cookies you like." I opened the door to let her in, grateful for the company despite the early hour. Evelyn had been widowed longer than I had, almost 12 years since Harold passed. She shuffled into the workshop, her slippers making soft sounds against the floor. "Could not sleep again," she said, setting the plate on my workbench. "Kept thinking about Christmas coming up. Another year of just me and the television." She sighed, adjusting the belt on her robe. "At least you have Rebecca and the family to keep you busy." I almost told her about yesterday's conversation about Derek's casual dismissal and Rebecca's uncomfortable silence. But looking at Evelyn's resigned expression, her shoulders curved inward, like she was protecting herself from disappointment, I realized something important. I did not want to become that person. I did not want to spend the next decade waiting for scraps of attention from people who had moved on with their lives. "Evelyn," I said gently, "when was the last time you did something just for yourself?" She blinked, surprised by the question. "For myself? Oh, Doug. At my age, what is there to do?" After she left with promises to check on me later, I sat down at the small desk in the corner where I kept my computer. Carol used to tease me about being old-fashioned, but I had learned to navigate the internet well enough to pay bills and order supplies for my woodworking projects. I typed slowly, "Christmas Tour Seniors, December." The screen filled with colorful advertisements showing smiling older couples in front of European Christmas markets, their faces bright with adventure and possibility. One tour caught my attention immediately. 7-day Scandinavian Christmas markets, featuring Copenhagen, Stockholm, and Oslo. The photographs showed snow-covered streets lined with wooden stalls, selling handmade ornaments and steaming cups of mulled wine. People bundled in warm coats laughing as they explored ancient city centers, transformed into winter wonderlands. The price made me pause $3,200. It was more money than I had spent on myself since Carol's funeral. But as I sat there, I remembered the savings account I had barely touched. In 8 years, the Postal Service pension that arrived faithfully every month, and the life insurance money from Carol that still sat in certificates of deposit, because I could never figure out what she would want me to do with it. Maybe this was exactly what she would want. I could almost hear her voice the way she used to encourage me when I hesitated about trying something new. "Don't just exist, Doug. Live." She had said that to me countless times during our marriage, usually when I was being too cautious about taking a vacation or trying a new restaurant. My hands trembled slightly as I filled out the online form. Name, address, credit card information. Each keystroke felt like a small act of rebellion against the careful, predictable life I had been living since she died. The cursor hovered over the Book Now button for a long moment. This was it. The first real decision I had made for myself by myself in years. Not something I was supposed to do or something that would make other people happy, but something I wanted. I clicked the button. The confirmation screen appeared immediately, followed by an email with my itinerary. December 21st through December 27th. I would be celebrating Christmas in Copenhagen, thousands of miles away from Grand Rapids, surrounded by strangers who had no expectations of me except to enjoy myself. For the first time since Carol died, I felt my heart actually beating with purpose. The suitcase lay open on my bed, like a promise waiting to be fulfilled. I had pulled it from the closet that morning, the same navy blue Samsonite that Carol and I had used for our anniversary trip to Niagara Falls 20 years ago. Inside, I had carefully placed her leather travel journal, the one where she used to write down interesting things we saw and people we met. The pages still smelled faintly of her lavender perfume. Packing had always been Carol's domain, but 32 years of organizing mail routes had taught me something about efficiency and preparation. I folded my warmest sweaters, methodically added thermal underwear I had not worn since my last ice fishing trip with Harold Price, and tucked my medications into a small toiletry bag. The weather forecast for Copenhagen showed temperatures in the mid-30s, Fahrenheit with possible snow. Perfect Christmas weather, Carol would have said. I was checking my passport for the 3rd time when I heard a car door slam in the driveway. Through the bedroom window, I could see Jim Crawford climbing out of his old Ford pickup, carrying what looked like a wrapped package. Jim had been my supervisor at the Postal Service for 15 years before he retired, and we had maintained the kind of friendship that comes from working side by side through Michigan winters and summer heat waves. "Doug," he called from the front porch, "hope you have got a minute." I found him standing in my living room looking around at the half-decorated Christmas tree and the boxes of ornaments I had never gotten around to unpacking. His weathered face broke into a grin as he handed me the package. I had called Jim the night before to let him know I would be traveling, not wanting him to worry when he didn't see me around the neighborhood. Word travels fast in a place like the Postal Service, especially when it involves someone doing something completely out of character. "The boys at the post office heard about your adventure," he said. "We wanted to give you a little something for the road." Inside the wrapping paper was a Postal Service travel mug with Grand Rapids Station etched on the side, along with a card signed by a dozen of my former colleagues. The messages were simple but heartfelt. "Have a great trip, Doug. You deserve this. Send us some pictures." "You know," Jim said, settling into Carol's old chair, "in all the years I supervised that station, I never had an employee more reliable than you. Never missed a day in 32 years. Not even when that blizzard of '98 shut down half the city. People on your route used to ask for you, specifically when they had problems." I felt a warmth spreading through my chest that had nothing to do with the coffee I was drinking. "It was just the job, Jim." "No, it was not just the job," he said firmly. "It was who you are. You take care of people, Doug. Always have." He stood up and clapped me on the shoulder. "Come on, let me drive you to the airport. No sense paying for parking when you will be gone a week." The ride to Gerald R. Ford International Airport took 20 minutes through streets I had traveled thousands of times delivering mail. Jim filled the silence with updates about mutual friends and stories about the new young postal workers who could not seem to understand that customer service meant more than just dropping off packages. "You know what I respect most about this trip?" Jim said as we pulled into the departure area. "You are not asking anyone's permission. You are just doing it." The airport bustled with holiday travelers, families hugging goodbye children, excited about visiting grandparents. I checked in at the counter, watching the agent print my boarding pass for Copenhagen, with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation I had not felt in years. My phone rang as I approached the security checkpoint. Rebecca's name appeared on the screen. "Dad, are you really doing this?" Her voice carried a note of surprise, as if she was just now understanding that her father was capable of independent action. "I am doing this, sweetheart," I said, balancing my carry-on bag while fumbling with the phone. "I will call you from Copenhagen." "But Dad, we could have talked about Christmas, maybe worked something out." I could hear the guilt creeping into her voice, the dawning realization that her father had options she had never considered. "Rebecca, this is not about punishment or making a point. This is about me choosing to live my life. I love you, Dad. Have a safe flight." "I love you too, honey." I hung up and handed my identification to the TSA agent, a young man who looked barely old enough to drive. He examined my passport with the kind of thorough attention that reminded me of my own work ethic, then waved me through the metal detector. Walking through the security checkpoint, I realized that no family members were waving goodbye from the other side of the glass. No grandchildren pressing their faces against the windows to watch Grandpa's airplane take off. For a moment, the absence stung. But as I settled into seat 14A and watched the flight attendants prepare for departure, something shifted inside me. The empty seat beside me was not a symbol of loneliness anymore. It was a symbol of possibility. I had spent 8 years being grateful for whatever scraps of attention my family could spare. Now, for the first time in decades, I was about to discover what complete freedom felt like. The woman in seat 14B had silver hair that caught the overhead lights perfectly, and she was reading Scandinavian folk tales with genuine focus. When she offered me half her granola bar 2 hours into the flight, I knew this would not be an ordinary trip. "First time to Copenhagen?" she asked. "First time anywhere in years," I admitted. "Douglas Reed." "Diane Fletcher, retired English teacher," she smiled. 35 years of convincing teenagers that Shakespeare mattered." "Did it work about half the time? The rest still think Romeo and Juliet is a movie franchise." We talked easily after that. Diane's husband, a history professor, had died 3 years ago. She traveled now because their empty house felt like waiting for something that would never return. I told her about Carol, about 32 years with the Postal Service, about grief mixed with gratitude. She listened without platitudes, nodding with the understanding of someone who had walked this path. You must have stories from all those years delivering mail, she said. I found myself sharing about the time I accidentally mediated a family feud while delivering a wedding invitation, how I ended up playing peacemaker in someone's front yard. Her genuine laughter felt like sunshine. Copenhagen's December air hit us like a cold slap, but the city sparkled with Christmas lights, reflecting off fresh snow. We shared a taxi to the hotel district, Diane pointing out landmarks with research-backed enthusiasm. The Little Mermaid statue, she noted as we passed the harbor, smaller than people expect, but charming. That evening at Tivoli Gardens, the famous amusement park had transformed into a Christmas wonderland. Wooden stalls lined pathways lit by thousands of twinkling lights, selling hand-carved ornaments and steaming cups of glögg. Denmark's spiced wine answered hot chocolate. Diane helped me navigate Danish phrases on signs and menus, her teacher instincts making learning feel like discovery. Tak, for thank you, unskyled, for excuse me. I appreciated her patience and natural grace. We found a small table outside a food stall, sharing hot chocolate while watching children ice skate on a rink surrounded by Christmas trees. The scene felt magical, like the Christmases Carol and I used to dream about in travel magazines. You know what I like about traveling alone, Diane said, warming her hands on her mug. Nobody expects you to be anyone other than who you are right now. She was absolutely right. For the first time in years, I was not Douglas the widower, or Douglas the retiree, or Douglas the forgotten father-in-law. I was just Douglas sitting in a Copenhagen Christmas market talking to someone genuinely interested in what I had to say. Walking her back through narrow cobblestone streets later that evening, I realized something surprising. I had not felt this comfortable with anyone since Carol died. Copenhagen mornings in December arrived late, but weak winter sun was casting shadows across the harbor when Diane knocked on my hotel room door at 9 o'clock. I thought we might explore Nyhavn before the official tour starts, she said, bundled in a burgundy wool coat. The guidebook says it's the most photographed spot in Denmark. The harbor district stretched like a postcard with colorful 17th century buildings reflecting in dark water. Bright yellows, deep reds, and forest greens lined the canal, each building painted by someone who understood that winter needed all the color it could get. We had walked 2 blocks when I noticed an elderly couple standing beside a street map, the woman pointing in different directions while her husband shook his head with frustrated confusion. "Excuse me," I said, approaching with the same instinct that had guided 32 years of helping people find their mail. "Can I help you find something?" They were looking for the round tower, their map in German, while street signs were in Danish. I pulled out my phone, used the translation app Diane had shown me, and within minutes had them pointed in the right direction. "You're a natural with people," Diane observed as we watched the couple walk away looking relieved. "Old habits," I said, feeling something shifting inside me, a usefulness I had not experienced since retirement. We found a traditional restaurant between 2 antique shops, where the menu was handwritten in Danish and the waiter looked like he had been serving herring since the 1950s. Over lunch, our conversation drifted deeper. "My husband always said travel changes you," Diane said, cutting her smoked salmon precisely. "He served in Vietnam before we met. Used to tell stories about the men he served with, how they looked out for each other." She paused. "He always talked about this one soldier who saved his life during a firefight near Saigon. Last name was Reed, from somewhere in Michigan." I set down my coffee cup carefully. "My older brother Edward served in Vietnam. He never talked much about it when he came home." Diane's eyes widened slightly, but my phone buzzed with a text from our tour guide before we could explore the connection further. Group meeting at 3 o'clock. That evening, 23 seniors gathered from orientation. Lars, our Danish tour guide, was explaining tomorrow's itinerary when I noticed Mrs. Patterson from Ohio struggling to hear from the back row. Without thinking, I stood up and helped rearrange seating, ensuring older members had the best spots near the front. "Much better," called out Mr. Davis from San Francisco, giving me a grateful wave. After the meeting, Lars approached me privately in the lobby. He was tall, with the easy confidence of someone who had managed travel groups for years. "You have a gift with seniors," he said, extending his hand. "I can always spot natural leaders. Have you ever considered tour guiding?" The question caught me off guard. "I'm just retired postal service." "Exactly." Lars smiled. "You understand customer service and seniors trust you. Companies like ours always need American guides who can bridge cultural gaps." Walking back to my room, I passed Diane's door and paused. Tomorrow we would head to Stockholm, and I could not shake the feeling that Diane and I had much more to discover about each other. Stockholm's Gamlestan Christmas market sprawled across the medieval cobblestones like something from a fairy tale. Wooden stalls nestled between buildings that had witnessed 5 centuries of Swedish winters. Diane stood beside a vendor selling hand-carved reindeer, her elegant winter coat, a deep blue, against the warm glow of market lights, snowflakes catching in her silver hair. "This is perfect," I said, pulling out my phone. "Mind if I get a picture?" She smiled, the kind of genuine expression that comes from someone truly enjoying the moment. As I snapped the photo, I realized how long it had been since I had wanted to capture anything worth remembering. We found a quiet corner cafe warming our hands around cups of steaming coffee, while the market bustled outside the frosted windows. The conversation had grown comfortable over the past 2 days, but something in Diane's expression suggested deeper waters ahead. "Douglas," she said, stirring her coffee slowly, "yesterday when you mentioned your brother Edward serving in Vietnam, something clicked for me." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "My husband talked constantly about a soldier who saved his life during a firefight near Saigon, Edward Reed from Michigan. He said Edward threw himself on top of him when the mortars started falling, took shrapnel in his back that should have killed him." The cafe suddenly felt too warm. "Edward came home with scars on his back. He never explained them." "Your brother saved my husband's life," Diane said, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Without Edward, I never would have met the love of my life, never would have had 38 wonderful years of marriage." She reached across the small table and touched my hand. "Do you understand what this means? Edward brought us together, even now." I stared at her, feeling the weight of decades and coincidence, and something that felt too profound for chance. "He died 10 years ago. Lung cancer." "He was a hero," Diane said simply. Walking back to the hotel, my mind reeling from the revelation, Diane noticed how quiet I had become. "You should share this happiness," she said as we reached the lobby. "Carol would want you to celebrate these moments, not hide them." I had not posted anything on Facebook since Carol died. But sitting in my hotel room, looking at the photo of Diane and me at the Christmas market, I felt something Carol used to call the urge to connect. I typed, "Sometimes the best adventures begin when you stop waiting for permission." The response was immediate. My phone started buzzing within seconds. Jim from the Postal Service shared it with a comment about how proud he was. Evelyn from next door wrote, "You look so happy, Doug." Former mail route customers I had not heard from in years started liking and commenting. Then came Rebecca's messages. First one, "Dad, where exactly are you?" Followed quickly by, "Who is that woman?" Then Derek wants to know why you didn't tell us about this trip. The notifications kept coming. Screenshots from neighbors showing my post had been shared dozens of times around Grand Rapids. Comments from people I had delivered mail to for 3 decades, all expressing surprise and delight at seeing their old mailman living his best life in Sweden. My phone would not stop buzzing. Likes, shares, comments, private messages. I had somehow become the talk of Grand Rapids, overnight. The retired postal worker who had surprised everyone by having a life beyond their expectations. I turned off my phone and looked at Diane, who was sitting in the chair by the window, smiling at my bewilderment. "Edward's gift to me after all these years," I said quietly. She nodded, understanding perfectly. He always did have excellent timing. The Oslo hotel room overlooked a city blanketed in Christmas Eve snow. Church spires, piercing the white landscape like promises of peace. My phone showed 47 missed calls from Rebecca, each notification a small accusation glowing on the screen. Christmas Eve. The irony was not lost on me. I finally answered on the 48th ring. "Dad!" Rebecca's voice cracked with tears and panic. "Everyone in Grand Rapids is talking about your trip. Mrs. Henderson showed me your Facebook post." "Who is that woman?" "Her name is Diane," I said, settling into the chair by the window, "and she is a remarkable woman." "But you never said you were dating, traveling, any of this?" Rebecca's words tumbled over each other. "Derek is beside himself. We had no idea you were even capable of what, living my own life." I kept my voice steady, the same tone I had used when she was 16 and needed to learn difficult truths. "You never asked what I needed or wanted, sweetheart. You just assumed I would always be there waiting." The silence stretched between us across 4,000 miles. "I raised you to think about other people's feelings," I continued gently. Remember when you were 12 and ignored your friend Sarah for weeks because the popular girls told you to? What did I teach you then? That taking people for granted hurts them, she whispered. A knock interrupted our conversation. A hotel staff member handed me an envelope. From your tour guide, sir. I opened the envelope while Rebecca waited on the line. Inside was a formal job offer from Nordic Adventures Tour Company. $4,000 a month winter season, all expenses paid. Rebecca, I have just been offered a job as a tour guide. A job, but Dad, you are retired. You are 69 years old. I am 69, not dead, I said firmly. I have value beyond being your backup plan for holidays. I heard muffled voices, then Derek came on the line. Doug, I owe you an apology, he said, his voice thick with embarrassment. I never meant to make you feel unwanted. I just thought, my parents always host, and you assumed I had nowhere else to go, I finished for him. You assumed wrong. Rebecca took the phone back, her crying audible now. I almost lost you. Did not I really lost you? You did not lose me, honey, but you forgot me. There's a difference. When you come home, can we start over, as adults who respect each other? I looked out at the snowy Oslo streets, at couples walking hand in hand toward midnight church services, at families hurrying home with last-minute gifts. When I come home tomorrow, we will start over as adults who respect each other, I said. But Rebecca, things will be different now. I'm different now. I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart. Merry Christmas. Rebecca stood at Gerald R. Ford International Airport, holding a handmade sign reading, Welcome Home, Dad, in Emma's careful third-grade handwriting. Her red-rimmed eyes brightened as I walked through arrivals with my navy blue Samsonite and newfound confidence. You look really good, Dad, she said, hugging me longer than usual. The drive through snow-covered Grand Rapids felt like seeing familiar territory through new eyes. Same Victorian neighborhoods, where I had delivered mail for 32 years, but everything looked sharper, more vivid. Derek has been cooking all morning, Rebecca said. He wanted to make Boxing Day dinner for you. Said he owed you a proper meal. The house looked identical from outside, but walking through my front door felt completely different. The Christmas tree stood fully decorated presents, scattered underneath, and roast beef filled the air. Derek emerged from the kitchen wearing Carol's old apron flower on his hands. Doug, welcome home, he said, his voice carrying none of the dismissiveness from a week ago. Hope you're hungry. During dinner, Emma and Sophia peppered me with questions while Derek served plates, and Rebecca poured wine with careful attention. Grandpa, did you really fly on an airplane all by yourself? Emma asked. I showed them photos from Copenhagen, Stockholm, and Oslo, Christmas markets, colorful Nyhavn buildings, Diane laughing beside a reindeer vendor. As I talked, I realized I was storytelling again, something I had not done in years. Grandpa, you're like an explorer, Emma exclaimed. In my workshop later, I showed them the Nordic Adventures job offer. Derek read it twice, his expression shifting to respect. $4,000 a month, he said quietly. Doug, I had no idea you were so accomplished. A tour guide. That is incredible. 32 years of Postal Service customer experience translates well to helping senior travelers, I said. As Rebecca helped the girls with coats, Derek lingered in the workshop, running his hand along my workbench. Doug, I need to ask something, he said. How do I make this right? Not just Christmas, but all of it. The way I have treated you, the assumptions I made. I looked at this man who had married my daughter, watched him struggle with insecurities for years, and saw something new. He was genuinely trying to learn. You start by asking instead of assuming, I said. Include instead of exclude. Remember that respect is not something you give when convenient. It is something you show because it is right. Derek nodded slowly. Would you teach me how to be a better man, better husband, better son-in-law? I felt something shift in the workshop, the same feeling from that Oslo hotel room when everything changed. I would be honored to, I said. Walking them to the door, I realized next Christmas would be built on respect, not guilt or obligation. Christmas morning arrived 1 year later, with genuine laughter echoing through the same Victorian house that had once felt like a museum of loneliness. Douglas stood in his kitchen watching Derek help Emma arrange homemade cookies, while Rebecca and Sophia hung stockings that everyone had chosen together. Grandpa, tell us about the Northern Lights again. Emma called from the living room where Diane sat reading A Christmas Carol in her warm teacher voice. to an audience of grandchildren who hung on every word. Douglas had returned 3 days ago from his second successful season as a Nordic Adventures tour guide, his confidence evident in the way he moved through his own home. The job had transformed him from forgotten retiree to sought-after specialist who understood exactly what senior travelers needed. "You know what I learned this season," Douglas said, settling into Carol's old chair while the family gathered around. "Seniors don't need someone to take care of them. They need advocates who understand their wisdom and independence." Derek looked up from arranging presents, his face showing genuine admiration. "Doug, I still can't believe how natural you are at leading groups. The reviews from your travelers are incredible." 32 years of postal service taught me that every person has a story worth hearing," Douglas replied. Diane smiled from her spot on the sofa, her silver hair catching the Christmas tree lights. She had become part of their family naturally, not through obligation, but through genuine affection, earned over months of Sunday dinners and shared adventures. "Speaking of adventures," Douglas said, taking Diane's hand, "we have an announcement. Diane and I are planning a spring trip to Scotland. Her late husband always wanted to see the Highlands." Rebecca beamed. "That sounds perfect, Dad. You two deserve every happiness." The transformation was complete. Derek sought Douglas's advice on everything from career decisions to parenting. Rebecca called weekly just to chat. The grandchildren saw their grandfather not as a burden, but as their personal explorer and storyteller. As they gathered for Christmas dinner, Douglas raised his glass. "A year ago, I thought family meant being needed. I've learned that real family is about being chosen, respected, and valued for who you are." Derek nodded. To Douglas, who taught us that respect isn't given when convenient, but shown because it's right. To second chances, Rebecca added, her eyes bright with unshed tears of gratitude. Later, as snow began falling outside the same windows where he had once sat, forgotten, Douglas reflected on the journey that had brought him here. Diane squeezed his hand as they watched the grandchildren play with their gifts. "Sometimes being left out is life's way of leading you exactly where you belong," he said quietly. "Looking back at my journey, I realize how close I came to spending my remaining years invisible in my own life. Don't be like I was. Don't wait for others to remember your worth. I spent 8 years accepting scraps of attention when God had so much more planned for me. The lesson I learned at 69 is this: respect yourself enough to demand respect from others. When my family forgot me, I could have grown bitter. Instead, God opened doors I never knew existed. That Scandinavian trip wasn't just a vacation. It was divine intervention leading me to Diane, to a new career, and to the family relationships I deserved. Grandpa, stories like mine prove that it's never too late to rewrite your narrative. This true story shows that when you stop waiting for permission to live, miracles happen. God doesn't abandon us in our golden years. He often saves the best adventures for last. My grandpa stories now inspire other seniors on my tours. They see a man who chose dignity over desperation, and it gives them hope. This true story of transformation reminds us that being left out can be God's way of leading us exactly where we belong. Don't settle for being forgotten. Your true story is still being written. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late for a new beginning. Comment below about a time you chose your own happiness, and don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring grandpa stories that prove life's greatest grandpa stories. True stories often come after 60.